The snowstorm howled across the dark mountains. Winds screamed like wild spirits. Tearing through the frozen trees, Kara held her baby tight against her chest, her arms trembling from cold and weakness. Her body was bruised, her skin pale, and her thin dress was soaked with snow. She had nothing left, no fire, no food, and her baby was dying in her arms. His little face was blue, lips dry, eyes barely open. His breath came in tiny gasps, each one slower than the last. Kara tried to cover him with her own body, but her strength was fading. Her legs were numb, her fingers stiff. She knew they couldn't last another night in the cold. The shelter was just a broken crate, half buried in the snow. Barely enough to block the wind, they had been hiding here for hours, maybe more. Time didn't matter anymore, only her child's breath did. She looked up at the sky, but there were no stars. Only thick clouds and falling ice she had sent. A signal for help long ago, but no one answered. Her people were gone. Their ship destroyed in the crash. She had run, carrying the child through snow and ash, hoping someone would find them, but no one did. Now she was alone, a mother with a dying child and nothing but snow around her. Her voice cracked as she started to sing a lullaby from her homeworld. It was an old song, one her mother used to sing when storms shook their village. She sang it slowly, softly, her lips trembling with each word. Sleep now, little star. Even if the sky is cold, her voice broke, but she kept singing, sleep now, little flame. Even if the dark is bold, the baby didn't move. A tear rolled down her cheek, freezing before it could fall. She rocked him gently, her arms shaking from the cold. If this was going to be the end, she wanted her baby to go with her voice. In his ears, not the wind. Then, just as she began the final verse, she heard it crunch. A sound deep and slow, like someone walking through the snow. Kara froze. Her song stopped mid-line, her heart pounding hard in her chest. She looked up, eyes wide, breath held tight. The wind still howled. But there it was again. Crunch, crunch, closer this time, not an animal. Not the storm footsteps, heavy ones. She pressed her child closer, her body tense like a coiled wire. She had no weapon, no strength to run. Her eyes darted through the snowflakes, searching the white fog. And then she saw it, a dark shape moving through the blizzard. Tall and slow, her heart raced. Fear and hope clashing inside her. Was it a soldier from the raiders? A scavenger? A wild beast? Or maybe, just maybe, someone who heard her signal. The figure stepped closer. And now she could see more. A large body, covered in thick armor, snow sticking to the sides. A helmet with a glowing visor, cracked and old. And the symbol on his chest, a Terran military patch. Faded but still clear. A human. Kara gasped softly, her lips trembling. She hadn't seen a human since the war began. They were strong, dangerous, and rarely showed mercy. Her people feared them, called them Deathwalkers, but this one was walking. Slowly, carefully, his hands not on a weapon, but at his sides, he stopped a few steps away, looking down at her. They stared at each other through snow and silence. Kara didn't speak. She couldn't. Her voice was stuck, her body frozen with fear and exhaustion. The human crouched down, snow crunching under his knees. His face was hidden behind the helmet, but something in his movement felt different. Not like a hunter, not like a killer. He looked at the baby, then at her. Kara clutched her child tighter, trying to shield him. The human didn't move. Then, slowly, he reached behind him and pulled off his thick winter coat. Without saying a word, he placed it over them both. Tucking it gently around the baby, Kara stared, wide-eyed, unable to understand. He was giving her his coat in the middle of a blizzard. She whispered something in her language. Not sure if he understood. Her voice cracked again. But the human didn't answer. Instead, he opened a small case from his belt and pulled out a survival pack. He pressed the heated pad to the child's chest, activating it. A small glow appeared, warmth spreading across the baby's tiny body. Kara let out a broken sob, clutching the child as his breathing picked up slightly. The human sat beside them, silent, watching the storm. He didn't ask for thanks, didn't speak, but Kara looked at him, eyes filled with shock and gratitude. The snow still fell, the wind still screamed, but in that broken shelter, under that human coat, a dying child breathed again. And Kara, for the first time in many nights, let herself hope. Kara woke to the sound of crackling, not fire, but something softer, a heat pad gently warming her baby's chest. Out. The storm still howled outside, but her ears caught another sound too, breathing, slow and steady. Just beside her, she blinked. Her vision blurred by cold and exhaustion, and there he was, the human from the storm. Sitting close but not touching her, his helmet sat on the ground, revealing a weathered face, scarred and silent. He looked older than she first thought, with dark circles under tired eyes. His breath steamed in the air as he stared at the snow-covered entrance of the wrecked shelter. Kara's heart pounded. Unsure whether to fear him or trust him, she pulled her baby close, checking his skin. It was warmer. Now, not perfect, but warmer. The child stirred in her arms, letting out a weak sound, a soft cry. Her eyes filled with tears, a mix of joy and disbelief. He was still alive, still fighting. The human didn't say anything, but when he saw the baby move, a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Kara studied him, confused. Why would a human help her? Her kind had fought them, feared them, painted them as monsters. But this one had given his coat to a stranger and his warmth to a dying child. That didn't make him a monster. She tried to speak, her throat dry. "Kakai." "Ra," she said, pointing to herself. Her voice was hoarse, broken, but she had to try. The human tilted his head, watching her. He didn't respond right away, just nodded slowly. She tried again, this time tapping her chest gently. "Kara," he looked down at a tag on his jacket and then pointed to it. It was scratched, but she could just barely read the letters R-Y-A-N. She nodded, repeating it softly. "Ra." Yan, the human Ryan, reached into a pouch and pulled out a small packet. Kay tore it open and offered it to her. Food paste, dense and warm. She hesitated only a moment before taking it. It tasted strange, metallic and thick, but it filled her stomach like fire in an empty room. She fed a little to her baby too. Slowly and carefully, the child licked at it weakly, then fell asleep again. Kara's tears ran silently. But this time, they were not from fear. They were from something softer, relief, maybe even trust. She looked at Ryan again, and he was still watching her, quiet as ever. She pointed to the snow outside, then crossed her arms in an X. He understood danger, cold, death. He pulled a broken device from his belt and showed her the screen. A flashing signal blinked across it. Distress beacon sent. Kara's eyes widened. He was stranded too. No one had answered his call either. That made them the same. Lost, forgotten survivors of war who no one came for. Ryan stood and stepped toward the shelter's opening. Peeking through the snow curtain, Kara's body tensed, but he raised a hand gently, telling her to stay. Then he turned, motioning her to follow. He was leaving, and he wanted her to come with him. She hesitated, clutching her baby close. Unsure, but where else could she go? What other choice did she have? Kara stood, her legs shaking as she stumbled after him. Ryan moved slowly, letting her keep up. He picked up his helmet and gear, then helped wrap the baby tighter. Without a word, he led the way into the storm again. Kara followed, limping, cold, but holding on to something she hadn't had before. Hope. They walked for nearly an hour, through snow that reached Kara's knees. She nearly collapsed more than once. But Ryan always looked back, always waited. At last, they reached it, a hidden cave built into the side of a hill. Inside were metal walls from a downed escape pod, sealed with rocks and covered in snow to stay hidden. It was warm inside, not much, but enough. A fire glowed in the center, burning. Slow and steady, fed by broken furniture and cables. A small pile of food rations and supplies sat in the corner. Untouched, Ryan gestured for her to sit, placing thick blankets around her shoulders. He placed the baby near the fire, careful not to get too close. Then he handed Kara a thermal cup, filled with a warm, spicy liquid. She sipped it, her body slowly relaxing as the heat reached her chest. Ryan sat across from her, finally removing his gloves. His hands were scarred and rough, but they moved with gentle purpose. He didn't ask questions, didn't demand thanks. He just existed beside her, calm and quiet. Kara looked at the man, a human, a stranger, and realized something. He had saved her baby's life, and now he had given them shelter, food and warmth, not because he had to, but because he chose to. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside that cave, a broken alien mother and a lonely human soldier found something stronger than fear. They found each other, and for now, that was enough. The fire whispered quietly. The only sound besides the soft breathing of a baby who had nearly died just hours ago. The cave was small, hidden, cold, but it felt like a palace to Kara. She had stopped shaking, finally. Her child lay wrapped in every piece of cloth they had, sleeping soundly near the heat, and for the first time in days, Kara didn't feel fear pressing down on her chest like a stone. She sat near the fire, watching Ryan move silently around the cave. He checked the makeshift barrier near the entrance, stacking frozen rocks tighter to keep the wind out. She watched his movements, not like a soldier, but like a man who had done this many times before. There were burns on his gear, and one of his boots was patched with thick wire. Even his strength had limits, but he never once complained. Kara ran her fingers through her baby's soft hair, humming the same lullaby she had sung in the storm. Only now, it was no longer a farewell. It was a promise that somehow they would make it through this. Ryan came back to the fire and sat across from her. He pulled out a small box and opened it. Inside were food bars, 2 heating pads, a half-cracked data pad. He handed her a food bar and smiled. Just a little, she took it carefully, nodding in thanks. Their words didn't match, but the message was clear. She tried to speak again, pointing to the baby, then making a gesture like flying away. Ryan looked down for a moment, his expression darkening. He pulled the cracked datapad closer and turned it on. A shaky projection blinked to life. A red warning screen. Signal detected. No response. Rescue request. Denied. Terran military loss recorded status. Mia Kara didn't understand the full words, but she understood the meaning. No one was coming for him either. Just like her, he had been left behind, forgotten in a war that chewed up soldiers and civilians the same. Her chest tightened, not from fear, but from the strange comfort of knowing he understood. He was like her, alone, but still fighting. Ryan picked up the heating pad and gently pressed it against her baby's back. Kara watched him with wide eyes, amazed at his care. He didn't look at her while doing it, just focused on keeping the baby warm. And Kara felt a strange new feeling rise inside her. Not just gratitude, but a small flicker of trust. She reached out slowly and touched his arm. Just for a moment, Ryan looked up, surprised, but didn't pull away. He gave a short nod and placed his gloved hand over hers. Only for a second, then he stood and moved back toward the cave entrance. Kara looked around the cave now with fresh eyes. It was clear Ryan had been here for some time. There were metal sheets against the walls, acting like insulation. The fire pit had been carefully dug into the floor, lined with melted tools and broken ship parts. On one wall, scratched into the metal, were Tally's days, maybe weeks. He had survived here, all alone, waiting for a signal that never came. She couldn't help but wonder, how long had he been alone before she arrived? How many storms had he sat through in silence? And why, after all that time, did he still choose to help a stranger? The baby stirred, letting out a soft whimper. Kara leaned down quickly, whispering sweet words. He was warm now, but still weak. She sang again, her voice stronger now. The lullaby danced around the cave walls, gentle and full of life. Ryan sat near the entrance, rifle across his lap, watching the outside. He didn't speak, but his presence filled the cave like a shield. Kara knew if anything came, he would protect them, not because he had orders, but because he wanted to. The fire popped gently, casting shadows on the rock walls. Kara closed her eyes for a moment, resting her head near her child's. She hadn't slept in 2 nights. Always running, always afraid. Now, with the warmth of the fire and the strange comfort of the human nearby, her body finally relaxed. And though the snow still fell outside, and the world was still broken, inside the cave, a mother, her child, and a lone human soldier found peace, if only for a little while. Sometimes survival wasn't about weapons or escape pods. Sometimes it was about kindness from a stranger with no reason to care. Kara knew the storm hadn't ended yet, but something stronger had begun, a bond that might just carry them through what came next. The fire burned low, casting soft orange light against the cave walls. Snow still whispered outside, but inside, everything was quiet, peaceful in a way Kara hadn't felt in a long time. Her baby slept soundly beside her, his cheeks no longer pale, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Kara kept her hand on his back, making sure he was real, that he was still warm, still breathing across the fire. Ryan sat with his legs crossed and a half-eaten ration bar in his hand. He didn't eat much, just enough to survive, always, saving the rest for her and the child. His eyes didn't blink often, as if he'd trained himself to always watch, always listen. Kara found herself watching him now, not with fear, but with quiet wonder. She had never spoken to a human before. Him. Her people had only ever described them with warning and anger. Brutal, dangerous, no mercy. But this one, this quiet soldier who gave up his coat, who built a fire, who shared every last bit of food, didn't fit those words. He was something else, something softer beneath the armor and scars. Kara picked up a smooth stone near the fire and slowly dragged her nail across its surface. She drew a circle, her planet, then a small figure, and then a ship flying away. Ryan leaned closer, watching her draw. She pointed to the ship, then to herself, then to the snow. Abandoned, Ryan didn't speak, but his eyes lowered for a moment. He reached beside him and pulled a charred piece of metal from his bag. On it was a burned insignia, Terran Fleet. He held it in his hand for a while, then placed it gently on the ground. He pointed to it, then to himself. Kara understood. He was left behind too. She didn't know how long he had been here, but, judging by the state of his gear, the fading color on his uniform, and the careful way he moved, it had been many, many days. And yet, he had not turned bitter. He had not turned cruel. She looked down at her baby, and then back at Ryan. The firelight flickered between them, and in that light, she saw something she never expected in a human's eyes. Loneliness. Kara pushed a warm drink toward him, one he had boiled earlier. He took it slowly, giving her a nod. She hesitated, then placed her hand flat against her chest. Kara. He already knew her name, but she said it again. Slower this time, she pointed to the baby and said, "Sila." Ryan nodded, repeating softly, "Sila." His voice was deep but gentle. He pointed to himself and said, "Ryan." Then he took the same smooth stone she'd drawn on and etched something else. 3 marks. Kara raised an eyebrow. Confused, he pointed to each mark. Then the burned insignia. 3 soldiers, 1 ship, 1 crash. Kara understood he wasn't always alone. There were others once, but now he was the only one left. She didn't ask how they died. The look in his eyes told her enough. He carried them with him still, in silence, in duty. In every ration he saved, in every night he stayed awake, watching the cave entrance. Outside, the storm howled again, louder than before. Ryan got up quickly, checking the edges of the shelter, adjusting the barrier to stop the wind from entering. Kara moved to help. Placing broken panels over the cracks, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. Every small movement was an agreement. A rhythm they had somehow built in only 2 days, like 2 musicians playing a slow, sad song without knowing each other's language. When they sat back down, the baby stirred and let out a soft sound. Kara held him close and began humming her lullaby again. The tune was softer now, no longer full of fear but hope, the kind of hope that grows from kindness, from survival, from shared silence. Ryan listened without interrupting. At the end of the lullaby, he pulled something from his pocket, a small charm. Dirty and worn, he held it out to her, unsure. It was a carving, maybe a gift from someone back home. She touched it gently, then closed his fingers around it again. Some things were too sacred to give away. The fire dimmed, and Kara leaned back, eyes heavy. She looked at Ryan one last time before resting her head beside Sila. And in that moment, with the baby breathing safely, the storm sealed out. And the human soldier still standing guard, she allowed herself to close her eyes, for the first time in forever. She felt safe. Ryan remained awake, rifle in hand. Eyes on the fire, the flames danced across his face, softening the lines drawn there by years of pain. And though he did not smile, something shifted in him. Not duty, not orders, just something human. Something deeply human. A new sun rose slowly over the frozen hills. Its weak light touched the snow like a whisper, soft, pale, and full of quiet promises inside the cave. A strange warmth stirred, not from the fire, but from something more powerful. Kara blinked. Her tired eyes open, her cheek resting against the cold stone floor. Her arms were still wrapped tightly around Sila, who now slept without a single shiver. For once, his breathing was calm. His skin no longer icy to the touch. She sat up slowly, sore but no longer afraid. The baby stirred in her lap, his small fingers clenching and unclenching in his sleep. Kara smiled and gently kissed his forehead, whispering a few soft words of thanks in her native tongue. Words meant for the stars, for the snow, and maybe for the human who still kept watch nearby. Ryan was already awake. Seated at the entrance of the cave with his helmet on, he looked like a statue guarding a sacred place. But when Kara moved, he turned his head slightly, just enough to check on her. Then wordlessly, he stood and walked over. Offering her a small metal cup filled with warm broth, Kara took it gratefully, bowing her head in thanks. The warmth of the drink brought color back to her lips. But it was the silence between them that offered the real peace, a silence that no longer held fear, only understanding. As the morning wore on, Ryan began stacking scraps of broken metal and wires. Kara watched, puzzled, until she realized he was building something, a cradle, with slow hands and careful effort. He bent an old frame into a safe curve and lined it with the softest cloth they had left. He never said why, but Kara understood he wanted the baby to have a place. Not just to survive, but to rest, and not on the cold floor. Kara placed Sila into the little nest, her hands trembling with emotion. The child cooed and stretched, then gave a small hiccup. Ryan sat beside the fire, wiping sweat from his brow. The wind outside had quieted now, like even the storm had paused to watch this moment. Kara found herself humming again. Not the lullaby of sadness, but one from her childhood. A tune of spring coming back after winter, of flowers pushing through ice, of birds returning to broken skies. Ryan listened from his spot, head slightly tilted. He didn't understand the words, but the feeling that he understood perfectly. Then it happened. Sela opened his eyes fully and looked at his mother. Kara leaned in, brushing his cheek, and said his name softly. And then, with no warning, the baby laughed, a soft, high, innocent laugh that broke the silence like sunshine breaks the clouds. Kara froze, eyes wide. She looked at Ryan, who also turned slowly, his helmet still on but body stilled. The baby laughed again, this time louder, waving a tiny hand. Kara's breath caught in her throat, her hands trembling. She hadn't heard him laugh since he was born. Not once. Tears filled her eyes. Not from sorrow, but from something that felt almost too big to carry. Hope. Real hope. Living, breathing, and now? Laughing, she covered her mouth, trying not to cry too loud and wake him. But the tears came anyway, and she let them. Ryan stood silently, then stepped forward, removing his helmet slowly. His face was unreadable at first, but then his lips curled into the faintest smile. He looked at the child, not like a soldier, not like a stranger, but like a man who had not heard laughter in too long, and somehow, this child's joy had reached into whatever was broken in him and lit a fire again. Kara watched him, her breath shaking. Then she picked up the child and offered him toward Ryan. He blinked, unsure. She nodded, gently insisting with careful hands. The human took the alien baby in his arms, at first. He held him awkwardly, like someone who hadn't done it before. But the baby laughed again and reached for Ryan's face. Small fingers touched his cheek, and something inside the human soldier cracked just a little more, in a way that healed rather than hurt. Kara sat close, watching them. Two lives that should have never crossed, now bound by survival, trust, and laughter. The fire crackled softly behind them, and the snow outside seemed less endless. Something had changed, not in the war, not in the stars, but in them. Ryan handed the baby back, his eyes softer than before. He didn't say a word. Didn't need to. Kara simply nodded, placing Sela back into the cradle. She looked at Ryan and whispered, "Thank you." He nodded once, and for the first time. Since the crash, Kara truly believed that this cave wasn't just a place to survive. It had become a home. The quiet days in the cave didn't last forever. Kara had almost begun to believe they would. The snow outside had melted just a little, and thin sunlight would sometimes peek through the jagged rocks. The baby was stronger now, smiling often, sleeping well, soft laugh echoing gently through the shelter like music. Ryan had begun repairing more things, patching the solar heater with melted snow and a power cell he pulled from an old drone. Kara helped him when she could, sometimes even laughing at his awkward attempts to understand her language. They were building something strange and beautiful, not just a shelter, but a fragile kind of peace. But peace is the one thing the galaxy never lets anyone keep for long. It started with a sound low, distant, almost like thunder. Kara was feeding Sela when she heard it. She froze, her ears sharpening like an animal sensing danger. Ryan heard it too, already moving too. The cave's edge, one hand on his rifle, the sound grew louder. Not thunder, not wind. Engines. Ryan pressed his back to the rocks and peered through a crack in the cave's barrier. A ship was landing in the valley below, black, wide-winged, and far too silent to be friendly. Kara stepped beside him, her hands shaking. She whispered one word, barely audible, but full of fear. Raiders. Her people had warned about them. Not soldiers. Not rescuers, Just pirates who scanned wreckage for life, looted supplies, and left nothing behind but fire. Ryan's jaw clenched as he watched the figures emerge from the ship. 3, maybe 4 at first, all armored, weapons drawn. They were moving slow, scanning the snow, looking for heat signatures, looking for them. Kara grabbed her baby and pressed him against her chest. Whispering for him to stay quiet, Ryan moved fast but calm, sliding over his gear. Loading his rifle with the last clip he had left, only 5 shots remained. Kara could see it in his eyes. He knew the odds. He had faced worse, but not with a child to protect. This time, he wasn't just a soldier. He was their shield. He handed Kara a small flare and pointed to a jagged path behind the cave. It led to the upper cliffs. A steep, dangerous route. She shook her head at first, refusing to leave him. But Ryan didn't argue. He just pointed again. Firmer this time. Go. Protect the child. Tears filled Kara's eyes, but she nodded. She wrapped Sela tightly in the warmest cloth they had and slipped into the back tunnel before disappearing. She turned and looked at him one last time. He met her gaze, gave a small nod, then turned toward the front of the cave, rifle raised. The fire behind him flickered, casting his shadow tall and unmoving across the stone. Minutes passed. Or maybe seconds. Time twisted in fear. Kara climbed the icy rocks silently, her heart pounding with every breath. She couldn't see the cave anymore, but she could still hear the wind. And then the first shot rang out. Loud, sharp, echoing through the frozen valley like a thunderclap. Then a scream. Short and gurgled, Kara held her child close and kept climbing, tears sliding down her face with every step. Another shot, and another. She didn't know if Ryan was still alive or if he had already fallen. The final shot was followed by silence. The kind of silence that crushes your chest. Kara reached the top of the cliff and hid behind a jagged outcrop. Her hands shaking, her mind screaming for answers. She stared at the distant ship, watching. For movement, nothing. And then, below, a flicker of red. A shape moved from the cave's entrance, dragging something. It was Ryan, his arm hanging limp. Blood staining the snow behind him, but he was alive, barely. Kara wanted to run to him, but she didn't move. She knew he had one more step to take. He dropped to his knees and pulled a flare from his belt, the emergency signal, and shot it into the sky. A bright light tore through the clouds like a blade. It was a cry for help. One final call, and for the first time since the crash. Someone responded. A new sound split the sky faster, sharper, a rescue vessel. Not raiders, not pirates, humans. They had seen the signal. They were coming. Kara fell to her knees, holding her baby close, whispering prayers through trembling lips. She didn't know if Ryan would make it, but he had done what no one else would. He stood alone between death and a child, and somehow still breathed. The rescue ship descended like a falling star. Its engines roared across the frozen cliffs, slicing through silence and smoke. Kara watched from her hiding place, her baby pressed against her chest, her breath frozen in the cold air. She didn't dare move yet, not until she saw him stand again, below her, near the mouth of the shattered cave. Ryan was on his knees, one arm hung limp by his side, the other braced in the snow. Still holding the rifle like a symbol, the wind tore through his hair. His armor cracked and stained red. But his head was up. He was still alive, Kara cried. Without a sound, her hand covering her mouth, she wanted to scream his name. To run down and hold him, but she waited. She waited as armored boots touched down near Ryan. She watched as 4 human soldiers in clean uniforms rushed toward him. One dropped to his knees and shouted into a cum, calling for a medic. Another aimed a scanner toward the cave. Toward the cliffs. Kara held her breath, ready to run if they raised their weapons. But then the unexpected. The soldier looked up and said one word through the speaker in her ear, friendly. Kara stepped out from behind the rocks. Slowly, her body trembling, she raised one hand high while the other held her child. The soldiers turned, startled eyes wide as they saw her alien skin, her pointed ears, her frightened face. One of them reached for his weapon, but Ryan raised a bloodied hand. He didn't speak. Just shook his head slowly, and they understood. Kara walked toward him, step by step, through the snow. The soldiers backed away, making space, watching with silent confusion. She knelt beside Ryan, tears running down her cheeks. She took his face in her hand, rough with blood and frost, and whispered his name. He opened one eye and gave her the smallest smile. Then he looked at the child, still wrapped in cloth and warmth. Still alive? Kara pressed her forehead to his, and in that moment there were no languages. No species, no sides, only survivors. Only those who chose love over war, life over death. The medics lifted Ryan onto a stretcher, his hand never leaving hers until they had to. She stood at the ramp of the rescue ship. Holding her child tightly, the baby looked up at the bright lights and blinked slowly. He didn't cry. He didn't shiver. He simply reached for the warm light as if he knew something good was finally here. Inside the ship, Kara sat near Ryan's bed, her fingers gently brushing the edge of his bandages. Machines beeped softly, scanning his vitals, feeding him strength. A human nurse came by and offered her food, water, and blankets. They didn't speak much, but no one pushed her away. No one called her enemy. For once, she was not a threat. She was a mother, a survivor, and she was seen as the ship took off. Rising through the clouds, Kara looked out the window. The snow-covered planet grew smaller below, the cave, the fire, the cradle Ryan had built, all fading behind them. But she did not feel sadness, because what mattered was not left behind. It was with her now, her baby, her future, and the man who had changed both. Sometime later, Ryan woke, his voice rough and tired. His first words were not about war, not about wounds. He simply asked, "Is he safe?" Kara nodded, her eyes full of light. She placed Scylla in his arms, and the baby, without fear, smiled up at him. And Ryan smiled back. That day, in the warmth of a rescue ship, crossing the stars. An alien mother, a human soldier, and a once dying child began something no war could erase. Not just survival, not just rescue, but family.